Chapter 4. The Hunted. The blood moon hung low in the sky like a festering wound against the dark canvas of night. Its crimson light cast long, dancing shadows across the deserted streets of Wolves Bane Falls, turning ordinary objects into monstrous shapes that seemed to move with a life of their own. "You're sure about this?" I asked, adjusting the strap on my backpack as we moved through the empty park at the center of town. The bag was heavy with supplies: garlic, silver steaks, holy water in glass vials that glinted under the moon's eerie glow, and somehow, knowing what was out there tonight made every step feel like trudging through quicksand. "As sure as I can be when we're hunting things that shouldn't exist," Rhonda replied, her voice barely above a whisper despite our isolation. She clutched a silver dagger in one hand and a crucifix in the other, both items that would have looked ridiculous under any other circumstances but now seemed utterly necessary. We weren't alone for long. The first sign of trouble was a guttural growl from the darkness behind us, a sound that made my blood run cold and sent shivers down my spine despite the warm night air. I turned just in time to see 3 figures emerging from between 2 houses, hulking forms with fur the color of rust, their eyes glowing yellow in the moonlight. "Werewolves," I whispered, though I knew it was unnecessary. We'd seen enough tonight to recognize the creatures that had once been human. "Stay behind me," Rhonda ordered, her voice suddenly steady and commanding as she stepped forward with her dagger raised. It was a side of her I hadn't seen before. Confident, almost fearless in the face of what should have terrified us both. Before we could react further, one of the creatures lunged at me, its massive paws swiping through the air where my head had been seconds earlier. I stumbled backward just in time to avoid being disemboweled, landing hard on the grass with a painful thud that knocked the wind out of me temporarily. "Mike," Rhonda shouted as she slashed at another werewolf approaching her from the side. Her silver dagger caught its shoulder, and the beast howled in pain, a sound that seemed to vibrate through my entire body as I watched dark blood spurt from the wound like a crimson fountain. That's when I noticed something strange about these creatures. Something different from the ones we'd encountered earlier at the hospital. Their fur was patchy in places, revealing patches of pale skin beneath, and their movements seemed less coordinated somehow, as if they were still adjusting to whatever had happened to them during their transformation. "These aren't like the others," I managed to get out between gasps for air as I scrambled backward on all fours. "They're weaker." Rhonda's eyes widened with realization just as another beast charged at her. This time she was ready, sidestepping at the last moment and plunging her dagger deep into its chest. The creature collapsed immediately, writhing on the ground as dark blood pooled around it. The smell of iron and something else, something unnaturally sweet like rotting fruit, filling my nostrils. "Mike, help me," she called out, trying to hold off the remaining 2 creatures while I got back on my feet. As I rushed toward her assistance, something caught my eye, a flash of movement from behind a nearby statue. A figure emerged slowly from the shadows, tall and thin with pale skin that seemed to almost glow under the blood moon's light. "Don't move," came a voice, cold, precise, and utterly inhuman despite its human form. "I wouldn't want you to get hurt before we've had a chance to talk." The figure stepped fully into view now, a man dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit that seemed completely out of place amidst the chaos of our encounter with the werewolves. His face was sharp-featured and handsome in a predatory way, but his eyes, they were wrong. Black as pitch with no visible pupils or irises, yet somehow seeming to take in everything around us with terrifying intelligence. "Who are you?" I demanded, my grip tightening on the silver stake I'd pulled from my backpack during our struggle with the wolves. "Call me Victor," he replied smoothly, a faint smile playing across his lips as if amused by something we couldn't see. "And I believe you 2 have been interfering in matters that don't concern you." Just then, one of the werewolves let out a piercing howl and lunged at Rhonda, who was now backed against a statue with nowhere else to run. Victor sighed dramatically before flicking his wrist dismissively. The werewolf froze mid-motion, its body going rigid as if suddenly turned to stone. "As I was saying," Victor continued calmly, turning his attention back to us while keeping the immobilized creature in his peripheral vision. "Your little investigation has been inconvenient." "Inconvenient," I spat, taking a step forward despite every instinct screaming at me not to provoke this thing further. "People are dying, being turned into monsters." Victor's smile widened slightly at that. "Monsters? Is that what you think they are?" "Perhaps once, but no longer." He gestured toward the werewolf he had frozen in place. "These creatures, once humans like yourselves, have been given a gift beyond their comprehension." "A gift?" Rhonda's voice trembled slightly as she pressed herself further against the statue behind her. You call this a gift? The power to transcend human limitations, Victor explained, his tone almost conversational despite the bizarre circumstances. The ability to run faster than any athlete, hear sounds from miles away, sense danger before it even manifests, and all it cost them was their frailty. I noticed something strange then. The werewolf that Victor had frozen suddenly twitched, its body convulsing as if fighting against whatever hold he had over it. Don't listen to him, I whispered urgently to Rhonda, my eyes never leaving the vampire before us. He's trying to confuse us. Victor laughed, a sound like tinkling glass that made my teeth ache. Confuse you, my dear friend. I'm offering you a choice. To continue your pathetic existence as humans, or join us in embracing true power. Before either of us could respond, the immobilized werewolf suddenly broke free from Victor's control with a guttural roar, lunging at its master instead of us. For a moment, the vampire looked genuinely surprised before his expression shifted to one of cold fury. Insolent, he hissed, as he sidestepped the attack with impossible grace. In one fluid motion, he drew a silver dagger from within his suit jacket and plunged it deep into the werewolf's chest. The creature let out a final whimper before collapsing onto the grass, dark blood spilling from its wound in crimson rivers that soaked the ground around us. That was unfortunate, Victor said with a dismissive wave of his hand as he wiped imaginary dirt from his suit. Some of them still retain their human memories and emotions. Such a nuisance. Rhonda's eyes widened in horror at what she had witnessed. Without thinking, she threw one of her vials of holy water directly at Victor's face. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The liquid sizzled on his skin where it made contact, causing the vampire to recoil with a hiss that seemed to vibrate through my bones. His perfect human facade melted away for just a second, revealing something beneath sharp fangs protruding from his mouth, skin turning a sickly grayish-pale color, and eyes that blazed with an inner fire before returning to their normal human appearance once more. Impressive, Victor said, his voice now colder than before as he wiped the holy water from his face with the back of his hand. You've done your homework. It's our town, I replied, stepping forward protectively in front of Rhonda. We'll do whatever it takes to protect it. Victor sighed again, this time with something resembling genuine annoyance. Very well, if you insist on being difficult about this. He raised his hand slightly, and suddenly the remaining werewolf, which had been circling us warily from a distance, lunged forward with terrifying speed. I barely managed to dodge in time, feeling the rush of air as its claws swiped past where my head had been seconds before. Run, Rhonda shouted, as she grabbed another vial of holy water and threw it at our attacker this time. The creature howled in pain as the liquid made contact with its fur, which smoked and sizzled where touched by the blessed substance. We ran then. Not away from Victor exactly, but toward the main street where we could potentially find more people, or better escape routes if needed. Behind us, I could hear Victor's footsteps, light, almost silent despite his size, as he followed us through the deserted park. Did you see that? Rhonda asked breathlessly as we ducked behind a row of bushes lining one side of the street. He wasn't just controlling them. They were following him, like pets, I whispered back, my mind racing with implications of what we'd witnessed. If Victor could command the werewolves like that, then he was more than just another supernatural creature. He was their master. Just then, a police car screeched around the corner ahead of us, its lights flashing in the darkness as it sped toward our location. Officer David Miller emerged from the vehicle with his gun drawn, his eyes wide with fear and determination. Get down, he shouted at us before turning his attention to Victor, who had emerged from the park entrance behind us. Freeze. Hands where I can see them. Victor stopped abruptly at this command, his head tilting slightly as if studying the officer with newfound interest. You're not supposed to be here, he said finally, his voice calm despite Miller having a gun trained directly on him. The others should have taken care of you by now. Miller's eyes widened in shock at these words before he seemed to steel himself for what needed to happen next. I'm sorry about this, he said, raising his weapon and aiming it directly at Victor's chest. But I can't let you hurt anyone else. Victor sighed once more, a sound that seemed almost weary now rather than menacing. Humans are so predictable, he replied, before suddenly moving faster than humanly possible. Dodging the bullet, Miller fired just as easily as if it were a thrown pebble rather than a deadly projectile aimed at his heart. The vampire was on the officer in an instant, his movements too fast for my eyes to follow completely. I only caught glimpses, Miller being lifted off his feet and thrown against the police car with bone-crunching force that made me wince even from where we watched hidden behind bushes nearby. No, Rhonda cried out as she saw what was happening. But I held her back. knowing that stepping into the open now would mean certain death for both of us at Victor's hands. When Miller finally hit the ground again after being thrown a second time by his attacker, something crunched sickeningly, a sound I can still hear in my nightmares sometimes when sleep finally comes these days. The officer didn't get up this time, his body lying motionless on the pavement while dark blood pooled around his head where it had impacted against the asphalt. Victor stood over him for a moment, looking down at what remained of Officer Miller with an expression of mild disappointment, before turning his attention back toward us once more. "Now then," he said calmly, as if nothing out of the ordinary had just occurred. "Where were we?" I grabbed Rhonda's arm and pulled her deeper into the bushes behind which we'd taken cover, knowing that staying hidden was our only chance at survival for now. As we crouched there in the darkness, watching Victor approach with deliberate, measured steps that somehow seemed more terrifying than any wild charge would have been, I couldn't help but wonder about what had just happened, and why Officer Miller had seemingly known who Victor was before even being introduced. "What do you think he meant?" Rhonda whispered urgently as we watched the vampire search the area around where we'd last been seen. "When he said the others should have taken care of you by now." I shook my head slowly, trying to piece together clues from everything we'd witnessed tonight. From transformed werewolves following orders like loyal dogs to Officer Miller's unexpected appearance and apparent knowledge about our pursuer. "I don't know," I admitted finally, "but I think there's more going on here than just random attacks by supernatural creatures." Just then, Victor turned suddenly in our direction, as if somehow sensing that we were watching him from nearby, and began moving toward our location with renewed purpose. We had only seconds before he would find us again. "Come on," I said urgently to Rhonda, grabbing her hand and pulling her deeper into the bushes away from where the vampire was coming. "We need to get out of here. Now." As we fled through the shadows cast by the blood moon, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted tonight. Not just in our understanding of what was happening in Wolves Bane Falls, but perhaps also in whatever game Victor was playing with all of us trapped here under this cursed sky. And when we finally emerged from our hiding place and saw another figure approaching from down the street, this one human, dressed in civilian clothes but moving with purposeful strides that suggested they knew exactly where they were going, I couldn't help but wonder if this night would ever end, or if we were all just pawns in some larger plan beyond anything any of us could comprehend. "Help," I called out to the stranger as they drew nearer, hoping against hope that they might offer sanctuary from whatever was hunting us through these deserted streets under the crimson glow of an unnatural moon. As they came closer still, I recognized their face. Dr. Sarah Chen, Rhonda's older sister and a respected physician at St. Mary's Hospital where we'd first encountered transformed patients earlier tonight. But something about her seemed different now. Her eyes were wide with fear yet determined all at once as she took in our disheveled appearance, and the trail of destruction visible behind us along this otherwise quiet street. "You're not safe here," she said urgently without preamble, grabbing our arms and pulling us toward an alleyway nearby where another figure waited in the shadows. Older, male, with kind eyes that seemed almost out of place amidst all that had happened tonight. "My father sent me to find you. We need to move quickly before they realize we're helping." I looked at Rhonda, who nodded silently before turning her attention back toward Dr. Chen and this mysterious new companion whose identity was still unclear despite our desperate situation. "Who are you?" I asked cautiously as we followed them deeper into the alleyway away from where Victor might still be searching for us nearby. "And what's happening here?" The older man stepped forward now, his face lined with worry but also something else beneath it, a determination that seemed almost familiar despite my not having met him before tonight. "I'm Richard Jenkins," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much already in this life. "And I've been expecting you both." As we followed Dr. Chen and Mr. Jenkins through a maze of back alleys and hidden passages that seemed to lead deeper into the heart of Wolves Bane Falls rather than away from it as I'd hoped, something became clear. Whatever was happening here under the Blood Moon's gaze involved more people than just Victor, or even the transformed creatures we'd encountered so far. And if we wanted answers, or any hope at all of surviving this night, we would need to trust these strangers who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere with promises of safety that felt somehow too good to be true despite our desperate circumstances. Little did I know then how right my suspicions were, and how much worse things could get before dawn broke upon Wolves Bane Falls once more, if it ever did at all, under this cursed sky hanging overhead like an omen of what was yet to come for us all trapped beneath its crimson glow.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Please stay tuned for the next installment of Blood Moon Chronicles, 7 p.m. Central Time. It's been a real pleasure. Oh, by the way, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you soon, my friends.